Are you ready to perform at your highest potential? Thank you for joining this GP Strategies webinar, where we'll explore best practices and innovative insights to help you and your organization improve performance.
So again, hello and welcome to Today Is Your Organization Ready for Generative AI Adoption? 3 key steps to ensure success with our presenters today, Linda Lampert and Julian Lee. My name is Kim Heyer. I'm with GP Strategies, and I'm happy to be your host for today's session. And again, I want to thank you for taking the time and joining us today. I'm excited to introduce you to today's presenters. Today's presenter, Linda Lampert, has worked for over 25 years in the field of human performance technology, helping clients improve the overall performance of their organization and employees. She has also over 20 years of experience designing and delivering solutions for companies implementing traditional ERP and cloud-based systems. And also Julian Lee. He is a certified change management practitioner with over 30 years experience successfully delivering change solutions to a broad spectrum of clients across multiple industries. Again, we have a great discussion planned for you today. And with that, I'm going to hand it off to your presenters. Thank you.
Good morning, everybody. Susan, I'm in Colombia, so not too far away. We're happy to be with you this morning. You know, it's interesting because we talked about having this topic come up. And of course, Julian was the first person I reached out to. He's my cohort in crime and coming up with solutions, and thought it would be a really interesting conversation today. And, you know, the more I look out, generative AI is everywhere. You know, I logged into my computer this morning and there's Copilot sitting up in the corner up there, waiting to help me out with my day or spying on me, depending on your perspective. I went in and there out in Outlook, there is somebody who is, you know, there's AI again suggesting that Tina is waiting for a response from me from 2 days ago. Uh-oh, I better get on that. That slipped away from me. I was on a call the other day and with colleagues and partners of ours, and they were calling in from all over the world. But then up in the corner there, that WN is actually a note taker that they have attend all their meetings, who's listening to what's being said, writing it all down, hopefully understanding what everybody's saying, but making me very paranoid about when I have my conversation. So there's AI again. My colleague, Brian, he's got AI Copilot now in his CRM system. So he comes in the morning and sees, you know, suggestions for how to get started. And what's really interesting, I think, in terms of the sales world is this is coming soon for him and others. Obviously, this idea that AI is listening to your calls and giving you call summaries, giving you impressions of what the call was like, it will be suggesting next steps. So it's really taking over our landscape. And I could probably put up 5 more screenshots up here from different kinds of generative AI conversations that I've been having with my teams this past week. What about you, Julian?
Yeah, ironically, hello, everyone. Linda, I was on a call with a OCM automation service provider that has trying to position OCM automation from end to end. And they shared some of the output of a survey, and it was ironic. It was so cool that they were able to take that open-ended text and produce an output that would have taken me hours or several days to come up with that same level of detail. And it picked up trends, it picked up sentiments, it picked up the number of types of topics, and it based on the prompts and the input, it determine where the gaps were and put mitigation strategies in place to help close those gaps. So I thought it was pretty impressive the way that generative AI has evolved to what my core capabilities in the OCM world as well. So it's here and it's here to stay.
Absolutely, absolutely. And so, you know, what we thought we'd talk about a little bit was sort of, you know, we joke about, oh, it just appears. But it really shouldn't just appear because there's so many risks that are inherent in the solution. So as we were talking about, you know, what we would want to talk about today, really we focused in on, how can your organization prepare and be ready to help ensure the success of your generative AI initiative. And as we started thinking about this, in the beginning, I was thinking, well, it's just another enterprise technology, right? We've all got enterprise technologies running our organizations. We'll just do it the same. But the more we looked at it and thought about it, the more we noticed differences or potential risk areas, certainly, that we want to pay attention to, specifically for generative AI. So we've come up with sort of 3 key things we think your organization should be thinking about, and we'll talk through those today. I'm going to encourage you as we go along, if you have questions or comments, post them in the chat, because we've been thinking a lot about this, but I don't think anybody is an expert right now. We're all figuring it out as we go along. And the other thing I would ask is if there's a particular kind of generative AI that your organization is looking at. I mean, I know we're using Copilot now, but there's a lot of other tools and that we're using internally now. Share it in the chat as well, because I'm sure the other folks on the call will be very interested in seeing that. So first thing we talk about when we want to make sure the organization is ready for generative AI is this need to align on purpose, strategy, governance, and roles and responsibilities. So Julian, what do you have to think about? What do you have to say about that?
Well, it's vitally important for all technology implementations for sure. But for this particular one, I think it stands out. All 3 stand out. And I'll tell you, I did a little research this morning and I found something quite interesting. And it was an article that written by someone from IBM. And it stated that 50% of all AI projects never make it from pilot to production, which means it's hard to adopt something if it doesn't make it to production. I think the 3 items that we've listed here will help make these AI projects make it to production, because we're getting the intent, the alignment of the project, and we're ensuring that all parties involved understand what the goals and objectives are, the purpose of the project. That is a very distinct piece that happens before a project is launched. Determine the KPIs. How does the AI model or the AI project align to the organizational goals that you're trying to accomplish? Ensuring that that happens, so you stay lockstep in reaching those, and AI should be the mechanism, one of the mechanisms to help attain those. That unified vision of everyone's on board, everyone understands what we're trying to accomplish from a generative AI project perspective, helps us ensure that the right people are involved and that we have the mechanisms in place to get those outcomes and benefits. And then you must have governance, right? You have to have some structure around how this is implemented, what the some of the parameters are, what the protocols are, what the policies and procedures are, identifying those key stakeholders, and then making sure that you identify the risk that occurs with this type of implementation. So that study this morning that I found just really resonated, because it does, if just think about it, for projects, if you don't make it to production, all the funds and all the monies that's being spent from pilot to not even getting it off the ground, that's huge. These 3 things that we're implementing or we're suggesting will help make that somewhat go away and puts it into perspective.
It's making me, I went to a conference recently with Google about generative AI, and US Steel shared a story which was really resonated with me. I think there's this tendency to think, oh, let's flip on all the switches right away. Let's set it loose and see what happens. It's exciting. There's people who want to get involved. US Steel shared a story about how they started using generative AI, and they picked a very specific pilot project. They identified KPIs for it. It had to do with sharing. They have a gigantic book that helps people maintain these giant dump trucks that they use in their mines. And it has 1,000+ pages of here's how you maintain, do different things. And they set up generative AI to be able to help an operator look up, how do I do X? How do I change the 20-foot wide tire on this thing? And they trained the AI to talk like an operator, who uses slang and other things, and to be able to look things up. And they were able to tie some very specific KPIs around maintenance to this pilot project, which then they were able to evangelize across the organization. But they brought in key stakeholders. They made sure there was governance. They did all these things that we would typically think about doing, for an ERP project, but fine-tuned to this particular application.
Right.
So that's kind of interesting, because I think especially that US Steel case study talked about who do you need to get involved. And I know you have some thoughts on that.
Yeah, absolutely. As you put together, and let's clarify, we have our AI and our transactional ways that we might be using it. This is to say an enterprise-wide project. If you look at the IBM article that Kim put into the chat, it's an enterprise AI project that's being implemented. So if you think of this going across the enterprise, that's a huge amount of people. And who are the folks that need to be involved? There should be some form of AI advocacy team, a group of people that have the foresight and have the vision and can lead that effort all the way through. And IT leadership obviously is a critical piece of that puzzle. Risk management. We're going to talk about the risk associated with these types of implementations. And Linda mentioned with the case study there that having the business stakeholders involved so they understand exactly what the expected outcomes are, what's required of them to be successful is all a part of who needs to be in this conversation.
Mm-hmm.
Jillian, I have a question that just came through.
Sure.
Asking, can you describe what an AI advocacy team is, or an example of?
Yeah, absolutely. And Linda, you chime in too if I miss something here. If you think of the AI advocacy team as your project team. I also learned that there are roles that could be involved in this, like a chief data officer, right? And then there's your chief AI officers. And then there are data leaders that could be involved in this. These could be sponsorship roles that people have. And then others could play in the shaping of what the whole AI, generative AI model looks like in terms of how it's shaped, how the governance works, and how the whole project is ran. So these are some of the roles that came to mind as I did my research this morning around what a AI advocacy team should look like or could look like.
Yeah. There was a comment a minute ago from Harriet. I'm not sure if it went out to everybody that said, so agree with this caution as we were talking about this need to be aligned up front. We can take so many lessons from the way we have taken to mobile phones. We love shiny things and are only now beginning to measure the consequences. So yes, we love our shiny things. Absolutely. Absolutely. So I think, and if you all have got an AI advocacy team going in your organization and you are able to share what particular people are involved, or maybe what people have been really important to your AI advocacy team. Another one we did not talk about at all was people representing, employees in the workforce. And there are so many, organizational concerns in terms of jobs, how jobs are performed, how jobs are monitored, involved in AI, that I think that might be another, and certainly union representatives, things like that could also be involved in the conversation. Okay, so that's our first area, really. The second one we wanted to talk about was really planning for engagement, learning, and performance support. So this is the people side of it, the people and performance side of it, which is really my bailiwick. And when we talk about that, so engagement, how will we ensure that users are motivated to use the solution? Obviously, you have people who are at home using ChatGPT to figure out what they should cook for dinner with the ingredients that they have in their closet or in their pantry. But there's a lot of people who might not be quite there yet. So how do we get everybody in the organization involved? The second big area there is learning or training, as we always used to say. What do people need to know in order to use technology effectively? And the third area there is performance support. What I call performance support, what other folks might call help. but it's really what resources are needed to support users and to drive adoption. So that can be a lot of different things to different people. And when we think about our traditional ERP solutions, I think generative AI is really going to require an evolution from those traditional solutions that we've been using over the years. So if you think over here on the left-hand side of the page, communications, really important before you start training, before you start any kind of learning, to communicate messages to your target audiences, letting them know what's coming and why, the what's in it for me messaging that we always talk about. And a lot of organizations, when they look at OCM, that's their main focus, is those communications and the different ways that they can get those out, whether it's an email, whether it's, all company meetings, et cetera. So ERP, good question, Michael, for folks who aren't in ERP world, enterprise resource planning. So those are those big enterprise systems that run organizations like Oracle, SAP, PeopleSoft, Workday. Any of those systems is considered an enterprise resource planning system. So in the typical implementations for those ERP kinds of systems, we start out with communications, and then we have training. And usually that's in-depth training on how to do your job using the system. And it can be, these types of implementations can run millions and millions of dollars. You can create thousands of documents or online learning, both in IELTS instructor-led training, e-learning, all kinds of training to teach people how to do their jobs correctly. And then the third piece there is performance support, because people really do learn back on the job. 80% of what they learn, we say, is back on the job when they have to apply all that training they had. So performance support has, in the course of my career, evolved from step-by-step procedures printed out on a daisy wheel printer. Okay, that's how old I am. But to now online help that's either, it's attached to your system through context sensitivity, or it's embedded in your production system so that you're getting that help as you're trying to do your task. So that kind of step-by-step performance support is a really, really important part of supporting users and ensuring long-term correct usage of systems. But then if we go keep going and we think about, okay, so how does this traditional approach really work with generative AI? I think there's a change here. And first of all, I think that enrollment phase is going to be more important and even need to be bigger. So not just the things that Julian talked about up front with making sure that we have KPIs and making sure we have governance, but this introductory messaging and alignment with the use cases. So here's how we're going to use this tool and how we're not going to use this tool potentially, and making sure that everyone gets that. So that's going to have to be a message that's cascaded down in the organization, that's communicated out through written communications. Maybe there's work groups or other kinds of things that get together to discuss this, but it's going to take more time and more effort, I believe, because the capabilities are so endless with this tool, and we want to make sure we don't just, set everybody loose. And then the second piece is the training. And this is interesting to me, I think, because these tools are not extremely difficult to learn how to use, right? I mean, you're writing a query potentially, you're giving feedback on that query, you're fine-tuning the results, et cetera, but it's not hard. It's not like I'm trying to teach somebody how to create material master records in a system where every single thing has to be done exactly right. So I think the training or the learning piece of it is potentially shorter, and potentially more this could be done through online means versus having to have instructor-led sessions. But where things really get interesting to me, I think, is in performance support and feedback, because of the fact that these tools can be used so many different ways, and you can get wildly different results based on how, for example, you write your query. I think this piece of performance support and feedback is going to need to be bigger and wider, more in depth than what we might have traditionally done for ERP. So that could be everything from having forums where you're sharing out results and giving feedback to people, having strong advocates that are built into the organization who are trained up on and aligned on how are we going to get people to do this correctly. And it's going to be a longer term investment too. It's not like you're just training people for go live and then 2 weeks later, they're going to be all trained up. I think it's going to have to keep evolving as these tools keep evolving. So that's kind of where I've been thinking. I just want to ask folks, does this resonate with you? How does this resonate with you? Does it seem to be, to make sense? And those of you who are specifically in training, have you thought about this? And I see a comment from Brian here that says, I agree that enrollment is so critical. I've had a Copilot icon sitting on my desktop, my browser, and my CRM applications for months, and I'm scared to click on any of them. That's great, Brian. That's a great piece of feedback. Anyone else out there have any thoughts you want to share here?
Can I go? Can I go?
Oh, Julian, please.
2 points I want to make. When you talk about the use cases, ensure that the use cases align with the key goals of the organization. So I just want to make that one point. But what resonates with me about the 2 different models is that it's a shift. It's a mindset shift in the way that you're delivering and preparing people for this. So not only is the technology change different, but the way that we're looking at it and the way that we're experiencing it is different as well. So that's a change that has to be addressed and help people to get through to understand that, if people are accustomed, to resonate to your example, if people are accustomed to getting hands-on training for extended periods of time before they feel comfortable with the solution, and then we cut it to this minimal amount that we think is needed for this AI, that's going to be a shift that they'll have to make and feel comfortable that they're getting exactly what they need to be successful with these type technology. So not only is the technology different, the way that we deliver it, the experience, the engagement, the way individuals use it will be different, and how we prepare them for that is going to be different as well.
Yeah. Manuel says, FOBO is one factor, fear of becoming obsolete. Yes, I totally get that. And, FOBO is something that, in organizational change management and learning, we've been dealing with that for years and years and years and years. I can remember when I first started in this field, we were bringing people, machine operators who had never used a computer on to use enterprise systems, and they were terrified. And some of them couldn't read, which is, it was really important to know who your audience was and to get a sense, not just of their skills, but also where their heads were at. And I think, Lorraine shared a question that I think actually plays really nicely into our third thing that we think companies really need to do to make sure they're ready for generative AI. Her message is, her question is, for your messaging, there are folks that range from scared to skilled. How do you determine your message given the range of perceptions? And the first thing, of course, is really to understand what the range of perceptions is, right? And to understand your audiences. And so from a learning and performance support and enrollment perspective, that we do a lot of analysis to determine that information. But part of that analysis is something that Julian's going to talk about next.
Great segue.
What a great segue, Linda. And that's really assessing project risk and readiness.
Yes, absolutely. It's vitally important with any technology solution to understand, to Linda's point, the audience, understand what's at stake, to do some type of readiness assessment, and also look at the risk involved with moving to a project of this nature. So ensuring that we know who those impacted audiences are, and we help prepare them for adoption. Also, we track the change readiness throughout the life cycle of a project. Everything from awareness through proficiency, knowledge of change, the proficiency to do the job. All those things are tracked as a part of this assessment process. And then any obstacles or barriers to adoption, any risk factors should be identified so we can mitigate those early in the process. So this analysis that should happen up front where we look at the project risk and we look at the overall readiness, determine where the gaps are, determine where the synergies are, and then put mechanisms in place to build off of both of those where it needs to be. Vitally important in any project, but something of this magnitude, again, with the the FOBO scenario, then it's obviously important that we understand our audience and we close any risk and make sure that people are ready for the change.
Yeah. So how do you do that? Yeah.
Yeah. Next slide.
And why? Yeah.
Well, some of the things to focus on from a project perspective. Again, this is an enterprise project that we're talking about. Promote that coordination between the project management and change management. So when projects identify risk, make sure that the organizational, the people risk are aligned to the overall project risk, and where there are dependencies and where there are overlaps and where things can be resolved, make sure that's brought up to that particular level. I address and identify risk early, and I'm going to share with you a mechanism to do that here shortly. We're in the next slide, but not yet. Identify them early and address them early. One of our key components of our change management approach, our methodology, is to be very preventative. So let's figure out exactly where the risks are, determine what's causing those risks, identify them, and let's start the mitigation early. That leads right into the deliverables that are part of the analysis. Once this analysis takes place, what are the deliverables to help mitigate that risk? And then report these things out. So it aligns with everyone understanding where the risks are. There are reports that identify where the risks are. There's mitigations that identify how we plan to overcome these risks, and that gets reported up to the right people at the right time. That's vitally important as we go through these projects to ensure that everyone has visibility to these risks and what our plans are to mitigate those. Everything from a project risk and a change management risk. And I'm going to share with you now what that might look like in an actual tool that I employ as a part of assessing risk. Every time I do one of these webinars, I like to share some of my tips and tricks and some of my tools. So this is one that's created by a group called OCM Solutions. I've been partnering with them for a long time, and they've come up with some pretty exciting ways to assess projects and ensure that you get the mitigation and the alignment and everything that you need. This particular risk assessment looks at it from two components. One, and I know it's a bit of a eye chart, but on the left it says project management readiness, and on the right side it says change management readiness. Do this early at the project in the project life cycle, and that will allow you to determine how you answer these questions or statements here, where the risks are and what it takes to close those risks. Now, if you think about that 50% I mentioned earlier, you got project to production. So does go live equal production, or is it they never make it to that point because there's just so many things that were discovered and were not discovered that didn't allow them to get to that those production numbers? These are the tools that can help us get there to make that number shrink and have more successful AI projects go to production in a very professional and very effective manner.
And Manuel asks, no AI to do this yet? Well, you said there you are seeing AI. And I think it's interesting. The more I read, I talk to, professors or other folks who are saying, can't we just use only AI? I think there's still the need for skilled people to interpret and to ensure that it resonates and that it's correct. But these kinds of inputs, I'm sure that's the next step, right? To start.
Yeah. And Manuel, the output of this tool itself is pretty impressive. Where when you get this information, there's lots to respond to.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So I think, it's interesting. These tools are definitely, helping and supporting our traditional OCM efforts and steps. And Manuel referenced John Cotter, who's a Harvard professor, back in the day, I think he's emeritus now, but and has this 8 steps of change management, which still resonate today. I have to laugh because I think he said published that in 1996, I think he said, and which 1996 was right before I started working with Harvard University. So I can picture that place and time very well. It
Yeah,
was
I
a
was a
long
baby.
time ago.
I was a baby then.
You were a baby then, yeah, but yes, I was at Harvard. Anyway, so it's interesting what this looks like for your organization, folks, is going to be maybe a little bit different depending on where you're at, how big your organization is, how long it's been around, where your workforce is at versus other workforces. But I think taking this kind of approach, we did want to include, and you all can get the slides for this and read this at your own leisure, but one of the companies we're working with is in the insurance sector, and this is a huge opportunity area for insurance companies. But they recognize really that they needed to kind of get alignment and leadership being behind this change. And so we've been working with them for some time now, looking at how do we get leadership aligned on what we're going to be doing. We've had different seminars and workshops with them, talking about things like responsible use, the value of clean data. We've helped develop podcasts and other kinds of interaction and training for their employees to try and move things in the right direction. And it's really been a journey for them over time. I think this project's been going on for almost a year. But really just important to try and make sure that there's that, they're following those good OCM project guidelines that Julian talked about in the beginning. So with that, I think we've got maybe if we have questions, we're going to be doing that next.
Thanks, Linda, and thanks, Julian. Actually, we did have 2 questions that came in that were kind of similar, and I think you already touched on them based on the case study and throughout the session, but it was they were asking, what is a successful generative AI strategy? And give an example of specific AI projects in an organization, which I think you might have touched on that case study. Right? Or do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, that's one approach. I think, what we're seeing is very much piloting approaches. So don't try and boil the ocean when you start. Figure out some case studies, identify possible metrics associated with those case studies. Think about who the audiences the right audiences might be. So someone mentioned earlier about how your audiences are a full range. You might not want to start with your most resistant audience for your pilot. That would, find a group that's going to buy in, find a group that's going to be good internal advocates, and get those folks involved. Figure out how you can do a pilot or a use case with them. I think would be another good idea. And think about where in your organization you could make some concrete change that's then going to resonate out. Maybe it's a particular business unit, maybe it's a particular role within the organization, but thinking very hard about who should we get involved in the beginning so we have success, right? Julian, I don't know if you have.
Yeah, and that overall strategy, I'll address my opinion about that. The overall AI strategy obviously aligns with what the goals and objectives of the AI project are. And then secondly, how does AI make the organization better? How do you improve operations? How do you perform better? How do you drive revenue? How do you grow the organization? Does the AI project or the AI approach align with those objectives of the organization? And if it does, shape the strategy around what you're trying to accomplish within the organization using those parameters, and let that be the catalyst for how you put that strategy in place, ensuring that that strategy and the tactical execution of the AI project aligns with what you're trying to accomplish as an organization to grow revenue, be better, be more high performing, and also improve continuous improvement.
I think one other thing I would think real hard about as you're thinking about where to start in your organization is to think about your leadership. And where in your leadership are you going to find a strong advocate, a strong evangelist for this approach? You want somebody who's going to stand up and really advocate for what you're doing and be a long-term, strong ally for the effort. So not everybody's going to do that.
Okay. Well, first, thanks to Brian. He shared a video in the chat that looks like something I want to watch afterwards.
It has puppies.
It has puppies. Sorry. I want to be conscious of time. I do have this one question that came in, and it's how does the approach we're speaking of today, I'm just trying to broaden the generative AI difference on what we're talking about for other kinds of AI. Does that make sense?
Well, yes. So AI
does
is
the
a
approach we're
very
talking-
broad topic, and people say AI. And we specifically wanted to talk about generative AI today because that other topic, Julian, that'll be webinar number 3. But
Yeah.
AI, broader types of AI. So we're not just generating information or generating knowledge, but AI is coming in so many different ways and forms, and some of these other ways and forms are really going to have much broader, I think, impacts on our organizations and how work is done in our organizations. So, for example, I do a lot of work with enterprise technology, enterprise systems, and the tools that people are using in the workplace are changing so much. The system itself is doing a lot of the transactional work that used to be done by people. And so those people are either, going away potentially, or their jobs are evolving so they can be more strategic, so they can be making better decisions, so they can be building relationships with customers or with vendors, being smarter and thinking harder and doing a lot more analysis. And that's a whole bigger topic because it's more than just find a use case and implement it. It is thinking very creatively and strategically about our organizations, how we put them together, our business processes, how they run. That's hard work. And I think a bigger and more substantial change management effort is needed to support that.
I agree.
Yeah. All right.
We just here's a question that came through just now, asking to share some successful cases for implementing Gen AI in a company. Anybody have anything to react on that?
Well, I mean, I know here at GP Strategies, where Julia and I work, we are using generative AI in a lot of different ways. GP has put together a team that investigate that. In our enterprise technology group, we've got an employee-led team that's looking at how can we use this to do what we do better, smarter, more cost effectively for our clients. And they've been investigating things. They're partnering with a company-wide AI group, with IT, with risk management, to try and figure out what are the tools. We have a website, an internal website that lists what the tools are that are approved for use, how they're approved for use. There's guidelines, there's samples. We have a internal chat group that focuses on AI. So all of those little pieces come together for our business, obviously that's going to be a different business. And then we have a chief evangelist in the company who kind of oversees all of that. So I'm not going to pretend that it's a perfect approach, because we're all figuring this out as we go along. But I think, what I appreciate, particularly in our group, is that it's an employee-led initiative. And, they've got some what are those? They've got gutters on either side of the alley that they're bowling in, but it's, it is, I think it's gotten people are really excited about it. So
yeah, I think the case study should be helpful in answering that question as well. Some successful outcomes as a part of the solution.
Yeah.
Sorry. We are coming up at the end of our time together. So if there are no other questions coming through, I want to take this time to thank Linda and Julian for sharing your expertise, knowledge on this subject. And as always, I appreciate working with you and your time. And it was a great discussion. I also want to thank the people that are on the call today. And at the end of the session, if you just take a minute to fill out a survey that we have, we always appreciate your feedback and take it very seriously. And we also hope that you'll join us again for another one of our upcoming webinars, and visit GP Strategy's website to view future sessions. And again, I want to wish everyone on the call a wonderful and productive rest of your day.
And I'm going to go watch the puppy video now.
Yeah, everybody watch the puppy
Thanks everyone
video.
for joining.
Thank you all.
This webinar was brought to you by GP Strategies. Together, we help organizations transform through their people. You can access more webinars or download additional resources by visiting the GP Strategies Resource Library. The link is on your screen and in the description.